Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. Greg, busy week around here in Titanland. They move on
I
from
can
head coach
imagine.
Brian Callahan, and Mike
Yeah.
McCoy is now the interim. Cam Ward spoke about it yesterday for the first time, and I just kind of want to open up the floor to you, given that we're not going to recap the Raiders game, obviously. Just kind of wanted to open up the floor to you
Yeah.
to give your thoughts about the situation and what perhaps the organization should be looking for moving forward.
Well, first of all, as you know, I'd gotten to know Brian pretty well and that coaching staff pretty well. And obviously in all these situations, when you discuss it analytically, you have to separate personal feelings. But I was just sorry to see it happen. I mean, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. That's not the point at all. The organization made a decision, but you just hate to see that happen anytime. And now they're going to move on. Fortunately, they had Mike McCoy, who's been a head coach in the league and has been in the NFL for quite some time on staff. So they have someone who's done that before. So that's always a positive if you feel you have to make that kind of move. Um, but one of the things I've always thought about, and you know, as you probably know, and people that have maybe listened to me for years know, I worked with Ron Jaworski for years and years, and he's one of my very good friends. And obviously, he played for Dick Vermeil, and they became very, very close. And Dick Vermeil, for years, used to come in when Ron Jaworski, when I worked with Jaws for years. And Coach Vermeil would come in two, three times a year, sit with us, and just the words of wisdom just are phenomenal. And besides sitting there talking X's and O's, just the leadership element, because Dick Vermeil was well known for that as well. And I remember something that he said, and I always think about it whenever a coach is fired and you have a high draft pick quarterback, whether he's drafted one, two, or three, a high draft pick quarterback, someone who's technically supposed to become a star and the face of your organization. And the thing that he said, when you draft a quarterback in that position, everything about the organization, from the janitor to the receptionist to the people in the marketing department, must be about making that guy a star. He says if you don't have that organizational focus about making that guy a star, it doesn't work and you all get fired anyway, again, 2, 3 years down the road. And that's the first thing I thought of. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say they weren't trying to do that. I was there for 3 days. That's not long enough to know what the whole operation is about. So this is no criticism of anybody in the building. But my point being, as they go forward, I think that has to be foundationally what the approach is. Because if Cam Ward does not become, when I say a star, does he have to be at the level of Patrick Mahomes? You know, there's only going to be, a couple of those guys. But he has to become a star type quarterback in the National Football League. That's the bottom line. And everything about the organization must be focused on that happening. Because if that doesn't happen, Buck, we'll be having the same conversation. Hopefully, we're still together. We'll be having the same conversation in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, Greg, I mean, we're
And
the only ones around
it
here who
might be
haven't been
about a different,
fired.
right, and it might be about a different quarterback at that point. If that, that's so that's to me, that's the direction. And look, Mike Borgonzi was with the Chiefs for 16 years. He knows what the focus has to be. He knows Andy Reid's focus. Okay. Obviously, Dave Ziegler's been in the league a long time. Chad Brinker's been in the league a long time. They have Reggie McKenzie there. They have guys who have a lot of experience in the NFL. I would like to believe they understand, no matter how much lip service they might give in other ways, that part of that is just the business. You have to say, we're trying to build a team, all that's well and good. Obviously, you have to build a team too. But the building of the team is fine. But if the quarterback is not reaching that level, then you're just a team. You're one of many teams.
And the quarterback is playing poorly right now, on top of all of the other things that's wrong with the Titans as a roster and not as you said, not it's not our place necessarily to criticize the schematic approach necessarily, but there is reason to believe, Greg, that there were things that Cam Ward has excelled at that they weren't implementing as much at. And we have, as a media corps, asked Brian Callahan that question many times. He has responded in kind, and then
Right.
we don't necessarily see
See
those
it
results
again.
on Sunday.
And again, this is just a quick aside, okay? But and like I said, I'm not there in the process of game planning and putting it all together. But when you look at their roster and what they have at the receiver position, to me, you can't go through a game with Calvin Ridley having one target. That can't happen. I mean, it's a simple point. And I know you know the way coaches try to rationalize all that. Obviously, they're not rationalizing it now because this is bigger news than what happened on Sunday. But I
Mm,
mean, sometimes you hear coaches say, "Well, the game just didn't work out." You know how coaches talk about this stuff, but that can't happen. That'd be, again, Calvin Ridley is the Titans' John Jefferson. Now, I'm not saying they're the same player, but for the Titans, excuse me, Justin Jefferson. He's Justin Jefferson as far as the Titans are concerned. Could you imagine if the Vikings went through a game and Justin Jefferson had one target? That would never, ever happen.
yeah.
So things like that just can't happen.
Just for context for the audience on Sunday, Ridley did have a hamstring injury and then was ruled out in the second half, which did contribute to the lack of
Right.
targets there. But to your point, like even then, Greg, it's been sporadic with the
It's been
the way that
sporadic.
they've gone
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. So, that's ultimately, I think that everything has to be about making Cam Ward a star. That's what it has to be right now. Look, they drafted him number one. That's the bottom line.
Yeah,
That's the way it works.
we have talked about this many, many times, and just to echo your point about working with Brian and covering Brian and our interactions with Brian, him lending his time to the live show. It's something that we're sorry to see, but we both understand. We've been around the business long enough that
So
this is
does
just
he.
how it
I
goes
mean,
sometimes.
he gets it. I mean, every coach gets it. You're not happy about it, obviously, and I'm sure he's probably upset in many ways, upset at himself because it didn't work out the way he had hoped it would work out and he thought it would work out. Maybe he's upset at others because he didn't feel like he was given a fair enough chance. Who knows? I'm not going to speak for Brian Callahan, but the point is they made the decision and now they got to go forward. Now, one other point about my feeling about this, which, hey, could be totally irrelevant, but we're talking and this is what we do. Um, I think you have to bring someone in who clearly has NFL experience, meaningful NFL experience in working with and producing quality quarterback play. To me, this is not the time to bring in some 33-year-old who you think might be a good coach in 5 years. I think you have to bring someone in who's done it and has worked with quarterbacks and walks in with a resume. And again, that doesn't mean it has to be the head coach, but you need someone who's going to be working with Cam Ward on a day-to-day basis who has that kind of resume.
Yeah, and Mike McCarthy is out there. He's got a relationship with Chad Brinker. We understand his resume at this point in time. He's not the only name, of course, but he is going to
Right.
be a popular name talked about around here
Yeah,
as we
I don't
work our
worry
way through
about that
coaching
right now
carousel.
because
Yeah.
I don't worry about that right now because we have a long way to go on that. I mean, we got a season to play before they're going to essentially decide who the head coach is going to be. Um, I'll be very curious though to see, and I may not be able to see it on film because a lot of the things that happen now are more tweaks than anything else. You can't change a philosophy going into week 7. So maybe you can tweak a couple of things. Maybe you take one part of the playbook and you do that a little more, and you take another part of the playbook and you say, hey, that doesn't work great for Cam, and you don't do that part of it. But it's not like you're going to have a total, philosophical makeover. That's not possible to do in the middle of a season.
No, of course not. And just again, we have 11 more weeks to see what they're able to accomplish. And the season is not, I mean, maybe it's not a playoff team, obviously, but at this point in time, there is still the opportunity to grow, and we'll see how they go about that under Mike McCoy. Greg, I know your time is shorter today, so I do want to make sure that we talk about the upcoming game because insult to injury, Mike Vrabel's coming to town to kick their ass.
Right.
So you
And
have
they got a second year quarterback who's playing pretty good.
Well, that's where I'd like to go because it's people are making it conversationally about Mike Vrabel, but it's really about Drake May and the
Yeah.
efficiency that he's playing with right now. What are you
Well,
seeing from the combination of him and Josh McDaniels?
and by the way, that in a sense makes our point. Because Mike Vrabel, and I know a lot of people highly respect Mike Vrabel. I got to know him very little. I wouldn't say I know Mike Vrabel at all. I think most people believe he's a very good head coach in this league, and I think in Tennessee they probably felt that way for pretty much almost all of his tenure there. Um, but what did he do? He brought in Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels had been doing this a long, long time and at a pretty high level. So that he brought in a guy that's worked with arguably the greatest quarterback of all time and knows how to put together a passing game and work with a quarterback. And look how comfortable. I mean, I've watched Drake probably every game going back to last year. Look, look how comfortable Drake May looks. And there's some litmus test things you look at, Buck, when you look at a young quarterback. You want to see how he performs on third down. Because third down, I mean, let's face it, it's the money down. If you can't convert on third down, as we've seen from the Titans, who I think are last in the NFL right now in third down conversion rate, you can't play. You just can't play. You can't move the ball. Um, May's been phenomenal versus blitz, okay, which is another really good thing because my guess is he's not the one dictating all the protection. So now you have to separate the quarterback from the O line and let the O line handle a lot of that. So a young quarterback, in this case, May, is not overloaded mentally, you know. And then the other thing, which I think May has been really good at, two things. Number one, they throw a good amount on first down, and I always think that's the best down to throw. And May's been phenomenal on first down. But one trait which I think May has really shown at a high level is pocket movement, which is different than getting out of the pocket. And a lot of young quarterbacks need to learn that. Now we're so used to a lot of college quarterbacks because they're better athletes than they've ever been, as you know. We see these college quarterbacks, they're great athletes now. And what they do is they leave the pocket. They just run out of the pocket. At the moment they either see an opposing jersey color or they feel pressure, what May has shown at a really high level this year is the ability to sort of in a calculated way navigate the pocket, keeping his eyes downfield, not dropping them. You never want to look at the rush, but keeping his eyes downfield and then making throws. That's a big time trait, which he has exhibited on numerous occasions this year. So his development has really been good. But the other thing that a lot of people may not know is in college, his coach was Clyde Christensen, his quarterback coach. And Clyde Christensen coached in the NFL for 30 years, and he coached Andrew Luck. He coached Peyton Manning. I'm missing another big time quarterback that he coached. It's escaping me right now. But I mean, he knows how to deal with quarterbacks and what good quarterback play is all about and how you get the most out of a quarterback, how you go through that process, because it's a process. Drake May didn't walk into the NFL as, okay, he's Drake May, he's great. Cam Ward didn't come into the NFL as, okay, he's Cam Ward, he had a great college career, he's great. Now everything's a process. So how do you manage that process the best way you possibly can? That's what you're dealing with.
Yeah, and you've seen the dividends of that so far. Obviously, it's still early in the season, but Drake May is playing at a very high level. The other player is
Really,
playing at a very high level, Greg, is Will Campbell, their first round pick this year, the offensive tackle.
he really is. I'm glad you mentioned that. And it's funny because I've watched him carefully too in every game because I was very curious. I'm not a left tackle guru by any stretch of the imagination. I try to learn from, O-line guys. For instance, I asked a bunch of O-line guys, different ones, what they think of arm length, and I got different answers. But one thing I've noticed about Campbell, and this is his trait that he has phenomenal balance and body control, and he stays in the term the offensive coaches, line coaches uses. He stays in his cylinder. You rarely see him bending forward or leaning sideways. He stays in his cylinder, and therefore the arm length. For the most part, there are a couple of plays. Obviously, there are going to be. He's played a lot of snaps now, but for the most part, on a high percentage of plays, you rarely see him off balance outside of his cylinder. And he's just look efficient. He's been a very good player.
Yeah, no, that's it's a combination of things, right? Obviously, May is the straw that stirs the drink, for lack of a better term, but they're getting a decent version of I'm blanking on the wide receiver, veteran wide receiver that's been there for 100 or that just
Stephon
got there
Diggs.
this year. Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs, they're getting better offensive line play than I think most people assume. Their run game is still suspect. Ramondre Stevenson is
Yeah.
struggling, but it's a team that knows how to play, and Mike Vrabel is a plus on the sidelines. It's going to be
And
difficult for anybody in the league.
Yeah, and you know what? They've got a lot of, Hunter Henry, well, no one's going to talk about him, and the George Kittle, Brock Bowers, that mold. He's been a really good pro for a lot of years. he's one of those tight ends that's just a really good player. And I'm sure people in your neck of the woods, remember Keishon Boutte as a freshman had that ridiculous game at the end of his freshman year where he gained like 350 receiving yards, and he was viewed as the next guy, and then ran into some personal issues and other things, and therefore was a sixth or seventh round pick, something along those lines. But he's a good receiver, and he's coming on as well. So they actually have some pretty good skill players. And you're right about the run game. It's not where they want it to be right now, and maybe it'll get there. But May just looks very comfortable. Everything he does looks easy. And I tell you what, one thing I learned from Phil Simms a long time ago, when you watch guys throw a ball, he'd always say, watch how they throw it. Do they work hard throwing it, or does it look easy when they throw it? And when he throws it, it looks easy. It looks like there's not a lot of effort, even if he's throwing it 50 yards down the field.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting matchup on Sunday for off the field reasons, and of course the football
Yeah.
itself. Greg, I appreciate your time. Of course, check out the NFL Matchup Show this Saturday. Greg is also on Colin Cowherd. You can hear him on Fox Sports Radio on Sunday mornings as well. The man does it all, and we appreciate your time, buddy.
Thanks, Buck. Appreciate it.